I think it's important that I give some context of how the South African process evolved up to the moment where I became a minister in the cabinet of President Nelson Mandela. That was at the conclusion of a period of 4 years of talks, literally starting with talks about talks, then talks, real talks, then dialogue, and eventually negotiations. And even once negotiations started, there were some breakdowns in the process. And every time when the breakdowns were there, we had to repair the process and start again. But nevertheless, after about 4 years of the whole process of talks about talks, etc., the new government was formed, democratically elected by all South Africans. And that was, of course, the change from apartheid to democracy in South Africa. That all happened in April of 1994. And just to remind you again, Mr. Mandela was released from prison at the beginning of 1990. So all of this took us 4 years to get to this position where the new democratically elected government could be formed. The reason why I'm mentioning this is to make it clear that, you know, we knew each other fairly well after 4 years of talks and negotiations. I had frequent opportunity up to that stage to interact with Mr. Mandela. But not only myself, also my principal, who was Mr. F.W. de Klerk, the last president of the apartheid government in South Africa. And so we had developed a good understanding and a good relationship and a basis of trust, so that when the change happened and I was incorporated in the new government, it was not a surprise, it was not a shock. We had a fair understanding of each other. It didn't mean that all the differences were suddenly out of the way. There were certain differences that remained. But the reality is we had a basis on which we could work together. As far as your question is concerned, I was part of those that represented the white community in the transition. And we didn't have all the support of all the white people, as you can imagine, because about 30% of white people didn't support the change. And some of them were very strongly against the change. But since we had the mandate from the majority of white people, we could proceed, and I think that was very important. So when we entered the new government, and us representing the white community, it was not a matter that we were standing on our own. We at least represented 70% of the white population. And that enabled us to go forward and do what was required in terms of creating the new South Africa. And I think I can say it was a smooth transition. Unexpectedly so, because many people up to that stage in the world expected that there will be a blow-up of the process, that we will not reach that moment of transition from apartheid to democracy. But fortunately, we managed in such a way that it happened very smoothly. And the transition was actually, I think one can say, a benchmark for others to follow. The major successes for us in South Africa was the fact that we successfully ended apartheid. As you will recall, apartheid was a very dictatorial system of prescription in which the white minority prescribed to the black majority. And that gave rise to the anti-apartheid struggle, which at the time of the end of apartheid was an international struggle of huge proportions. And for us, the success lied in the fact that we could manage that transition from apartheid to a democratic arrangement in South Africa, a new constitution that provided and guaranteed democratic rights for all South Africans. That, I think, was a major success. And like I said earlier, it was unexpected for many around the world. So that was the success. The failure, I think, was the fact that we didn't bring about all the expectations that the black majority in South Africa had about what democracy would really mean. And we are still, to be frank about it, we're still struggling with those expectations today. It's 30 years later, and many expectations that black people in South Africa, the black majority in South Africa had, have not been fulfilled. Because the people at the bottom end have not seen the results of what the democracy means. The people at the higher end, those that can take care of their own needs, are in a good position. I'm talking about all South Africans, black and white. But people at the bottom end have not been satisfied. And for that reason, I think we have to look back and say to ourselves what we could have done better to ensure that that aspect was also addressed. And I think, if I have to be honest with myself in this regard, what we should have done after the transition, in other words, once we concluded the democratic constitution, we should have further planned on how the transition actually evolved in a socio-economic way, so that a socio-economic transformation could also take place. The success reflects on the political arrangement, on the fact that every person got a vote, which they didn't have in the past. But the socio-economic transformation was incomplete. And unfortunately, even today still, for many South Africans, still remains incomplete. Well, I think that's a very important question, and I don't think there is a clear answer to that, to be frank. And it comes down to the fact that all of us have our own, each of us have our own interpretation of history and what it means. I think under the leadership of Nelson Mandela, South Africa was extremely fortunate, simply because he was a person that led the reconciliation between black and white in South Africa. He had all the reason himself to lead a process of separate narratives, because he was 27 years imprisoned, as you know. But he came out of prison and never showed any vengeance or any revenge. And that was exceptional. And that is one of the reasons why I think the whole world holds him still in high regard for the person he was. But today still we're struggling, long after his death, we're still struggling to really ensure social cohesion, if I can call it that. Meaning black and white addressing the perspective and the future from exactly the same point of view. And I don't think it's possible, at least not yet. Maybe in generations to come, hopefully it will change. But to be frank about it, the majority of black people today even would still blame white people for apartheid. It's three decades later, but they would still hold white people responsible for apartheid. White people on the other side would say, but it's three decades later, can't you forget? And it's not possible. We all know that, you know, to move from where we were as a country, living in racial segregation for 300 years, to change it in 30 years is almost impossible. And I think one has to keep that reality in mind. And I think it applies to many conflicts where the same characteristics would prevail. So I think it's important that we have to be honest with ourselves and say that we have to keep on working at building the same narrative, but it will take some generations still to come to make that happen. And I think we have to be patient with each other in that regard. Well, from my observation, and I'm sitting here at the southern tip of Africa, which is far away from the Basque Country. But from my observation, I unfortunately have to say that I think the process is not complete yet in the Basque Country. And there are probably two reasons for that. The one is that there was never really a peace agreement. And secondly, as a result of that, there was not really a process of reconciliation at any stage. And the reason why I'm pointing out these two factors is that in our own case, we fortunately first had an agreement about the future. And that agreement was the new constitution, the new democratic constitution for South Africa. That was our real peace agreement. But once we had the peace agreement in place, the new constitution, we could ask the question, what went wrong in the past? And that helped us to establish the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And that was the process of reconciliation. What I want to repeat is the fact that we first had agreement about the future before we asked the question about who was wrong and why. So we looked at the future first and then said, let's ask, why did it happen? I think if it was the other way around, South Africa might not have seen a peace agreement either. But we could negotiate a new constitution with an aspiration for the future. We could say to each other, what is it that we want from the future? Instead of what is that we want to protect from the past. And once we had that agreement through the new constitution about the future, we had the process of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And my advice in all situations where I've been involved over the last 20 years would be that it's important that the peace agreement is to be followed with a process of what is now commonly known as transitional justice, or as we call it, Truth and Reconciliation. And I think, you know, in your own situation, the Basque people would be entitled to ask for a process of truth and reconciliation. Because truth and reconciliation in South Africa meant two things. It asked the question about who was responsible. And by doing so, we managed to get perpetrators and victims talking to each other physically talking to each other, perpetrators and victims. It was a very appealing process. It was emotional in the South African case, as you can imagine. But it was necessary because it also contributed towards healing. People could start to make peace with each other. So that was the one major aspect of the Truth and Reconciliation. But out of that, there was also the process of reconciliation. And although the South African process was not perfect in every respect, and I can point out where the failures were, it was at least successful to the extent that we had a successful reconciliation process that went along with the constitutional transition to democracy. And we were very fortunate, of course, that we had the role of the religious community playing a very important role in that regard. We all know the role of Archbishop Desmond Tutu in that regard, who was formidable in his reconciliation process as leader of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. I think a number of factors played a role in our case, which I would like to highlight, because I think it can be applied in other societies as well where there's conflict. The first is that we followed a fairly inclusive process. In other words, when we started to talk and develop dialogue and negotiations, all the relevant stakeholders on both sides of the conflict became part of the negotiating process. And it was Mr. Mandela who was insistent on the fact that all parties, all role players, everybody with a different persuasion should be part of the negotiating process. It was very inclusive. It was not only the big parties, it was also smaller parties. Because in that way, we accommodated so many different persuasions. The second was that we, through the process of negotiation, succeeded in building relationships, personal relationships, across the divides that existed before. You can imagine when we started our talks in South Africa, we started off as enemies. It was serious. Black people hated white people, understandably so. And it was only through the fact that we had to sit down with each other, talking to each other like you and I are talking now, looking each other in the eye and say, who are you? Where are you coming from? Tell me more about yourself. And in that process, we developed relationships. And out of the relationships, we also developed trust in each other. And that is one of the major characteristics of the South African case. I tend to offer the example of Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa and myself. He is now South Africa's president, as you know. But at that stage, he was leader of the ANC negotiating team. I was leader of the apartheid government negotiating team. We started off as enemies, and we ended as friends, simply because we developed a level of trust in each other, knowing each other, respecting each other. We didn't agree on everything, but that was not necessary, but it was important that we trusted each other. And the third element was the fact that we took ownership. We didn't pass the responsibility to outsiders. We didn't even have mediators to resolve the problems for us. We acted as our own mediators, simply because we took responsibility and ownership ourselves. I gave these as principles that informed our process. And I think you correctly said, all conflicts are different. The Basque situation is completely different to that of South Africa. We can't replicate in the Basque country what we experienced in South Africa. But what we learned in South Africa can be adjusted and adapted to make it work also in the Basque country. And I would say it's never too late. Those frustrations that you might experience even today still have to be addressed, because they won't go away without being addressed. And I think that is important. Well, I think I would add 2 points. The first is that we were fortunate to have leadership in South Africa that led the process, of which Mr. Nelson Mandela was most prominent. But there were other leaders as well. But we succeeded in overcoming our challenges because of the leadership and the commitment by all the leaders to find a peaceful solution in South Africa. And I think that is why it's so important that you mentioned yourself that a peace process is required. You can't end a conflict without a process of dialogue. You can't end a process of conflict successfully without a dialogue, where the opponents or the former opponents come to sit together and find the real solutions. And combined with that, a process of reconciliation. So I would like to emphasize in conclusion those 2 aspects. It's for me a great pity that I can't be with the audience when you have the meeting next week. I think it's on the 17th or the 18th. It's for me a great pity. I regret that I can't be there. And I hope that next year I would have the opportunity to visit again the Basque country and have thorough discussions and explore what can be done to address the unfinished business as far as the peace process in the Basque country is concerned. I wish you well with the conference. I hope it goes very well. And please don't hesitate to reach out to us in South Africa. And I can bring along maybe some of my former opponents, some of my former enemies when we come to talk, because that makes it so much more powerful if we speak from the position of where we were and how we can share the way in which we made peace in South Africa. Thank you very much.